Welcome to The Conversation. My name is Brendan Malone, and in this episode I want to talk about one simple idea which I think would go a long way to improving media accountability. It's no secret that there is a major crisis of public trust in the mainstream media. By and large, we just don't trust what the media is presenting to us on a regular basis. And there are good reasons for this. Media reliability has just dropped right down through the floor for a whole lot of complex reasons that we don't have time to get into in this particular episode. Just recently in my country, some academics released data showing that less than 25% of New Zealanders trust the media, less than 25%. Just to put that into some sort of perspective, that same survey also found that 33% trusted politicians. So the very people, politicians, who are known for adages like, how do you know when a politician is telling the truth? Their lips stop moving. Or, what's the definition of a political gaffe? Well, it's when a politician accidentally tells the truth. So that group of people are considered more trustworthy by the general public than the mainstream media is in New Zealand. What was shocking about this data was they asked some quite pertinent questions, I think, which gave us a bit more of a handle on this. And what was fascinating was that they asked people, well, what about the media sources that you actually go to? Not just the general news stories that you see, say, flying across your social media feeds, but the stuff that you choose, the outlets you choose to get news from. And what was shocking with that question was 45% of people in that group still didn't trust the media outlets that they were choosing to use. So there is a major crisis of public trust with the mainstream media, and what makes this so astounding is that it seems that a lot of people in the media just are either oblivious or they don't really seem to care about this. They just, all I've heard so far are excuses. I've heard people regularly claiming that this was something that was caused by Donald Trump or the alt-right and it's just some big crazy conspiracy theory, the whole fake news thing. No, that's not what happened at all. The reason that whole fake news catch cry took off, and it's used by everyone of all political persuasions now, is because we know it's true. We know that there is a lot of information that is put out into the public square by the mainstream media, which is actually very unreliable. Sometimes it lacks balance, sometimes it lacks important facts, sometimes it's just downright false. I have been involved in media training of individuals and organisations, and which actually initially started as being a media spokesperson for an organisation myself, and then morphed into media training. And I've been doing that for about 17 years now. And I can tell you from first-hand experience that this has got a lot worse. In fact, it's got to the point now that when I train people and I'm doing media training with them or giving them advice, I always say that one of the most important things you can remember is that unless you know a journalist personally as a friend, then you simply cannot trust that what you tell them will be reported accurately or fairly. So you need to be very, very cautious in what you say. Now, that is shocking that it has got to that state of affairs, especially when you consider the whole point of the journalistic profession is to actually tell the truth and to actually give us accurate, unbiased information about things that really matter. So what is the one idea that could actually improve all of this? Well, it's something I've been mulling over for a while now, and it is pretty simple. But imagine this situation. Every time you go to a news site, and at the top of every story, you saw a banner. And that banner, big red banner, and it read, edits that have been made to this story since publication. And when you clicked on that banner, it would bring up a whole new page which would show you exactly every single edit, every single change that had been made to that particular story since it was first published. Whether it was a small change like fixing a grammar or a spelling problem, or whether it was a major change like adding in a voice who wasn't included in the original story, so there was a lack of balance, or correcting false information and bringing factual and truthful information into a story. You would see all of that. And what you would have there is a log which would ideally list the time and the date that the changes were made, and then also would tell you how many hours after publication these changes were made. Now, why would that be so important? Why would something as simple as that help to improve media reliability? Well, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I think straight away you would have easily obtainable and publicly available data which would show which media outlets were consistently having to correct false information in their stories. It's not rocket science. What would happen is, as soon as this data was made available, other people outside of those news organisations would begin to track that data because it would be easily accessible. At the moment, it's a lot more laborious. I've been involved in efforts where this has been done, and it's a lot more laborious to actually track issues around media reliability and changes and things like that that are made to stories. It's actually very, very hard to do. And even then, it's hard to compare data because you may have accurate data on one story from one news outlet, but you don't realise that another news outlet may have engaged in edits of its own and you're just not aware of it. So you could make the mistake of thinking one was reliable and one wasn't. But if every news outlet was treated the same and it was a requirement that they actually had to do this, the data would be there, it would be clear, and it would be very, very reliable and measurable. And what would happen all of a sudden is people would start tracking and publishing from outside of those media organisations statistics on which news outlets were reliable and which ones were consistently unreliable and what the edits were that were being made each month or each week or each year on their particular site. And I guarantee you that what would follow on pretty quickly from that would be that there would be rankings that would be given and publicly available to actually show which media outlets were reliable. There would be a ranking system you could look at and you could actually see straight away. And I think this would be hugely helpful because probably one of the immediate effects of this, I think, would be that more news outlets would start taking caution, because one thing that journalists that I engage with consistently tell me is they hate even the thought of being considered unreliable or lacking in balance or lacking in accuracy, not taking proper care and not actually being ethical journalists. A lot of them even hate the thought or the aspersion, the accusation that is actually true of them. So I think once it became publicly available and easily trackable to ascertain who was and who wasn't reliable, a lot more caution would be taken in the whole area of media reliability. Not just that, but I think also in this situation, really, with the modern mainstream media environment, haste is the enemy of the good. And the reason you have so much haste is because ad revenue is now driven primarily based on clicks. That's why you see so much clickbait. It's why headlines in articles don't tell you the whole story. They give you a teaser. It's a clickbait often. It's why when news sites post to their social media feeds a link to a story, they don't tell you the important information in the story. They tease you to get you to click on the story, because it's in you clicking on the story that their ad revenue is driven. So you need the clicks. Now, a click-based environment also depends on speed. It's no good if you bring a story online 2 or 3 hours after lots of other news outlets have already published that story. No one, or certainly a lot less people, are going to click on that story. But if you can be really quick, then more people will click on your story and your revenue will be better as a result. And so what would happen, though, if you actually had a reliability index which was measuring things, then I would suggest that probably a lot of organisations would be more likely to actually slow down a little bit, because they would know that if they rushed information out into the public square that was actually having to undergo sort of major edits for factual accuracy a bit further down the track, and that editing process would be measured and captured and observed and recorded and used to actually measure their reliability, they're probably more likely to actually slow down a little bit. And it's quite conceivable that we would see a little bit less haste from the mainstream media, because what they would actually do is make sure that they had their facts correct, and that when they were making edits, they were only to add more details, not to amend false or incorrect information that was put out there without proper fact checking. There's another important reason why I think this matters too, and that is the fact that now, thanks to the internet, there really isn't a news cycle. Once upon a time, you had a news cycle, and it was probably 12 or 24 hours, depending on the deadline of a particular mainstream media outlet, whether they published or broadcast their news, once a day, twice a day, however long it was. There was a cycle that you worked with, and what that meant was that news would cycle in, and then it would cycle out of the news. And so, as the old saying goes, Yesterday's news is today's fish and chip wrapper. So in other words, when something was broadcast on television or was published in a newspaper, once the next edition came out, what had previously been there was old news. And so if you made a mistake, it was there and then it was gone. But now, those mistakes, those lies, the misinformation, because of the internet, there is no news cycle. The news cycle is basically constant. It's always present. So those errors will always be present online. As the saying goes, the internet is forever. And so mistakes, factual errors, lack of balance, they are there whether you are reading the story today or 5 years or 10 years from now. And so having that ability to look even 5 years from now and see what edits were made would be helpful. I think it would also be a tool that would mean that it would be more likely that those news outlets would correct false information. And what would happen then is that you would look at stories 5 years from now and you would get a more accurate picture. And by the way, this is why it's really important. If you ever find yourself the subject of a media story and there is false information about you in that story, you should always contact the outlet that has done that and demand that they retract or change the information in their stories. And the reason why this would be so important is because you might issue the most amazing public declaration that is seen widely by people right here and now about a story that has just been published about you, and everyone understands very quickly in the here and now that that information was false and wrong. But 5 years' time, 2 years' time, even 6 months from now, there'll be a lot of people reading that story who won't know that it was false. And so what you want is a more accurate story on the record, because there's no news cycle. It's going to be there in perpetuity unless the story is taken down. And even if it's taken down, people will probably still use the Wayback Machine and it will be found somewhere on the internet. The internet is forever, and so I think this really matters. But I'd love to hear from you. Do you think this one simple idea would actually help to improve media reliability and accountability? Do you think that it should be legally required that all news outlets have to very clearly at the top of every single story they publish have a hyperlink bar which would take you to a page showing you all of the changes that have been made to a particular story? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Thanks for watching this episode of The Conversation. Don't forget to like, share and give this video a thumbs up. That all helps the channel. And wherever you're watching, please subscribe. If you're on YouTube, don't forget to hit the little notifications bell as well. That way you'll get updated about every new piece of content that we publish. A huge thank you to everyone who is supporting us at patreon.com/leftfootmedia. For as little as $1 a month, you can help to ensure that this great content keeps happening. So that's patreon.com/leftfootmedia. As little as $1 a month or as much as you'd like to contribute. And a huge thank you, as I said, to everyone who made today's episode possible. You guys are awesome. I'll see you next time on The Conversation.